In 1929, a worker clearing the Topkapı Palace Library in Istanbul pulled a fragment of gazelle skin parchment from a forgotten shelf. It was a map, dated 1513, and along the bottom of the world, it appeared to show a coastline that no human being would officially see for another 300 years. Antarctica. Not a smudge, not a guess. A jagged, mountain-lined shore, drawn 3 centuries before the continent was discovered, and supposedly buried under a mile of ice the entire time. For 60 years, one question has refused to die. How? How does a coastline that's been frozen solid for longer than our species has existed end up sketched on an Ottoman admiral's chart in the middle of the Renaissance? Tonight, we open the file, and the answer is stranger than the legend. Start with the man. Piri Reis was no fringe figure. He was a senior admiral in the Ottoman Navy, a working cartographer, and the author of a famous sailing manual. When he signed this chart in 1513, he wasn't dreaming. He was doing his job. The surviving fragment shows the Atlantic, the bulge of West Africa, the coast of Brazil, the Caribbean islands, all recognizable, all consistent with what European explorers were sending home in that exact decade. Then the eye drifts south. The South American coast runs down the page, and instead of stopping, it bends. It turns east, sharply, and keeps going, tracing a long landmass studded with mountains across the bottom of the map. Here's the collision that built this entire mystery. The official discovery of Antarctica is dated to 1820. 3 separate expeditions, Russian and British and American, sighting the ice from their decks. Before that, on every honest timeline, the southern continent is a rumor, a blank, a place no ship had reached. So how is there a coastline on this page in 1513? The most provocative reading came in the 1960s, and it's the one that launched 1,000 documentaries. That bent southern shore isn't South America at all. It's Queen Maud Land, a real region of the Antarctic coast, drawn as it would look with the ice removed. Bays, where modern surveys find bays. Headlands, where modern surveys find headlands. If that's true, somebody mapped Antarctica green. Hold that thought. Because one impossible map could be a coincidence. So let's find a second. One uncanny map is an accident. But what if the same vision shows up 18 years later, drawn by a completely different man, in a completely different country, who never saw the Piri Reis chart? That's where this stops feeling like a fluke, and starts feeling like a leak. 1531, Paris. A mathematician named Auguste engraves a world map shaped like 2 hearts. And at the bottom sits a vast southern continent. Finet labels it Terra Australis, the southern land. But it's the detail that stops people cold. His Terra Australis isn't a blank coastal outline. It has an interior, mountain ranges, river systems flowing inland, a landscape, as if someone had actually stood on it, now layer in the modern data. For decades, we couldn't see Antarctica's real shape, the true rock beneath the ice, until radar and seismic surveys mapped the subglacial terrain. Those scans revealed the continent hiding under the sheet, buried mountain ranges, deep basins, ancient river valleys carved before the freeze. And the believers point at Finet's 1531 engraving and ask the question that hangs over this whole investigation. How does a 16th century Frenchman draw rivers and mountains on a continent we couldn't actually see the inside of until we had machines that look through ice? 2 maps, 2 countries, 2 decades apart. The same ghost continent, apparently ice-free, apparently detailed, apparently centuries early. So we follow the paper. Because Piri Reis told us in his own hand exactly where his map came from. This is the part everyone skips. They show you the coastline and never read the Admiral's own notes. And his notes are the most important document on the entire parchment. In the margins of the 1513 chart, Piri Reis wrote a confession. This map, he says, is not original. It's a compilation, stitched together from around 20 older charts. Some he attributes to the maps of his own era. One he credits to Christopher Columbus. And several, he claims, descend from sources dating back to the age of Alexander the Great. That single line is the seed of the whole legend. Because if Renaissance cartographers were copying from charts that were already ancient, then the knowledge on the page isn't Renaissance knowledge, it's an inheritance. A signal passed down, degraded, recopied, half understood, from somewhere much older. This is where Charles Hapgood enters the file. a college professor who in 1966 published Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. His thesis: these maps preserve the work of a lost, advanced, seafaring civilization that charted the entire globe, including an ice-free Antarctica, before recorded history began. The originals, he argued, were stored in great ancient libraries, copied by Greeks, carried through the Byzantine Empire, and finally inherited by Renaissance mapmakers who no longer understood what they held. And Hapgood went further. To explain why Antarctica could ever have been ice-free recently enough for humans to map it, he proposed Earth crustal displacement, the idea that the planet's entire outer shell can slip, shoving whole continents toward the poles in a geological eye blink. He even had a letter of cautious interest from Albert Einstein, written for an earlier book: A Lost Civilization, Ancient Libraries, A Slipping Crust, an Einstein endorsement. It's a complete story. It explains everything, which is exactly the moment a records-only investigation has to stop nodding and start reading. Here's where most channels roll the credits, because the legend is more fun than the file. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to put every claim back on the table and check it against the record. And the record does not say what the legend says. The bent coast is ice-free Antarctica. Look at what Piri Reis actually drew. The South American coast runs south and then turns east at almost a right angle, and keeps that eastern run for an enormous distance. 16th century Portolan charts did this constantly. When a coastline ran off the edge of the available parchment, mapmakers bent it to fit the space. The simplest reading of that southern shore isn't a second continent at all. It's South America's own coast, folded sideways to stay on the page. The matching bays appear only after you rotate, rescale, and crop the map until it cooperates. Give a coastline enough freedom to spin, and it will match almost anything. Finney saw the real Antarctica. Terra Australis was not a discovery. It was a belief, one that predates these maps by over 1,000 years. Ancient Greek thinkers reasoned that a great landmass must sit at the bottom of the world to balance the continents up north, or the planet would topple. So for centuries, cartographers drew an enormous southern continent they had never seen, purely on theory. Finney's mountains and rivers aren't survey data, they're decoration, the standard visual grammar every mapmaker used to fill unknown land. And his Terra Australis is far too big, in the wrong place, the wrong shape. It's a guess that happens to sit near the pole because a guess about the bottom of the world usually does. Humans saw Antarctica green. This is where the legend breaks completely. The East Antarctic ice sheet isn't thousands of years old. It's roughly 34 million years old. It formed long before any human ancestor walked upright. There was no recent window, no last interglacial, no near miss, when people could have sailed an ice-free Antarctic coast and lived to chart it. For the maps to show a thawed continent witnessed by humans, the entire science of the planet's history would have to be wrong by tens of millions of years. And the slipping crust. Hapgood's crustal displacement was overtaken almost immediately by plate tectonics, the framework confirmed through the 1960s that actually explains how continents move. They move slowly, over millions of years, not in a survivable flash. Einstein's letter was a polite note of curiosity, not a verdict, and curiosity isn't confirmation. Strip it down, and not a single load-bearing claim survives contact with the documents. So is the file closed? A misread coastline? A recycled myth? A debunked geology? Is that all? No, because the real story the records leave behind is, if anything, harder to believe than the legend. Sit with what these maps actually are. In 1513, with no satellites, no chronometers, no aircraft, an Ottoman admiral gathered 20 separate charts in different languages, on different scales, and fused them into one of the most accurate world maps of his century. The relative positions of South America and Africa on the Piri Reis chart are startlingly good for the era. That's not alien knowledge, that's human knowledge, compiled, cross-checked, and stitched by hand from the work of dozens of forgotten sailors and mapmakers whose names we'll never recover. That's the lost civilization. It was ours. And the lost library wasn't on Atlantis. It was the accumulated anonymous labor of generations of navigators, most of whom died unrecorded. The maps aren't a leak from a vanished super race. They're a monument to how far human beings can reach with patience, ink, and the recovered work of the dead. That's the chilling part. Not that someone impossible drew Antarctica, but that we so badly want a lost golden age that we'll look at one of the great achievements of real human ingenuity and decide it must have belonged to somebody else. The Piri Reis map survived because it was filed and forgotten in a palace library. Of the 20 source charts the Admiral named, almost everyone is gone. The record we have is never the whole record, but these maps taught us the thing this channel keeps proving. The most powerful myths aren't built from lies. They're built from real documents, genuine records, each one true on its own, quietly stitched together into something that was never there. We just watched it happen across 5 centuries of paper. Now watch it happen in orbit. There's an object people swear has been circling the Earth for 13,000 years. Newspapers reported it before Sputnik ever flew. Tesla may have heard it in 1899. NASA may have photographed it in 1998. Every single piece of that story is real. And that is exactly the problem. It's on screen now. Pull the file.